Hi everyone, how you doing? It's Mr. Davis here. This is just a bit of feedback to help you move on to the next section with your self-analysis and evaluation work. Thank you for those of you that submitted. So much of what you've done is a million times better than what we were looking at last year, and it will absolutely help your overall mark and ultimately your grade at the end of this. But there are still a few areas of weakness that we need to just tighten up on. First of which is just the definitions of the fitness components. So whilst you might have a version of each of these in your head, for the actual work, the examiner will be looking for the exact word-for-word version that's listed in the specification, and these are the definitions that you need to use, not a bit of it, not kind of a mixture of these words, but the specific wording exactly as you see it on this page. So if you've commented on agility being a strength or a weakness, you need to say that agility is the ability to move and change direction quickly with control. Nothing else, not your own version of it, the exact word for word version. So can you please check that at any point during your work where you've referenced a fitness component, you've got the correct definition in there. We're still getting people getting things like strength and power mixed up. We're still getting things like agility being a bit of a mixture of reaction time and speed. You need to have them exactly as you see them. Same thing for these. So if, as I hope most people have, you've decided to go with continuous training, you need to just give a brief outline of what it is and just go with this exact phrasing. Okay, there's other things that you can add into that, for instance, the time that you might do it for, details of the intensity and things like that, and we'll get into that in a minute, but you need a basic overview of what's involved in the training. Some people have still gone down a different route. I'm not quite sure why, but you've decided to go off piste and look at another training method. That wouldn't be a problem if you link the training method to the correct fitness component. But what people are saying, or some people are saying, is that they've, for instance, highlighted cardiovascular endurance as an issue and then said that they're going to do circuit training. Those are not, that's not a training method that matches up. Yeah, you're going to feel some secondary benefits from it, but circuit training is to do with muscular endurance. So if you've made that error, you need to correct it now. My suggestion, and I'm the one that's marking it and giving you the overall score, is do continuous training. Have cardiovascular endurance as your fitness component to improve. Even if you are Mo Farah, you put down cardiovascular endurance as your weakness and you say that you're going to do continuous training. That is what you need to do. If you want to get a good mark, that's what you need to do. Simple as. The next thing that you need to focus on is the information that's included in the strengths and weaknesses. You've each picked out two strengths, which are fitness components, two fitness components, one of which is a strength and one of which is an area for improvement, and two skills, one of which is a strength and one of which is an area for improvement. What you need to do now is add in the technical information that's going to push your mark up. In this part of the work, the technical detail that you add in is the thing that dictates what mark you're going to get for this first part of the work. So simply just saying that one example of when you did it and then the day of the week that you played the game on is not going to score very highly. That's one example of something that I've seen in the work. On a different example, this sort of thing is what is going to get you good credit and high scores here, where you're commenting on the actual movement, the technique that's being used, whether that's for the skill, and you break down the skill and think about what each part of your body's doing to contribute towards the skill. And if you don't know, you need to research it. Don't blag it and think you can make it up, and don't just ignore it because it is important. So just Google technique for shooting, technique for passing, technique for dribbling, whatever it might be, and then just try and use that information in your work. Okay. That's how to get the marks. Simply just saying the day of the week that you played the game on is not going to get you very many marks. The best work also includes technical information when you're referencing the fitness components. So if you said that you've got high levels of power, what is it that you do that generates that power? Do you bend your knees? Do you use your arms to drive up? If you're talking about agility, what is it that you actually do that helps to give you that good level of agility? What adjustments do you make in terms of your body shape? Any detail that you can give there is going to help boost your marks. I know it's slightly more difficult with the fitness components, but you need to load up on the technical information. The people that get the best and the most technical information in will get the highest marks. Then we come on to the second part, which is to do with the training and essentially like the evaluation work. So in this bit, the first thing you do, and this training bit is all to do with the highlighted areas for improvement. The training specifically is to do with the fitness component that you've highlighted, i.e. cardiovascular endurance. So you say which training method you've chosen to use to improve cardiovascular endurance, and you should be saying continuous training. Then you give a basic outline of what's involved in continuous training in its general form. So that basic description, then you can add in general, it tends to last at least 20 minutes. In general, that puts you working in the aerobic training zone, and say what that actually is. In general, it means you're working at 60 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. What's the other thing I said there? And the general benefits of it. So in terms of improving cardiovascular endurance, but are there any other benefits that you might get from continuous training? How do you expect that to help you in your game? So you just put together general information. Then after that, in the next paragraph, you go into the specifics of what you are going to do. You're not going to be working at roughly 60 to 80%. You're going to be working, for example, bearing in mind it's a weakness, at 60%. 60% of your maximum heart rate. How do you calculate that? Well, maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. So for me, that's minus 20. That gives me a maximum heart rate of 200 beats per minute. From that, I need to work out what 60% is, because 60% is the threshold at which my training becomes aerobic. Any lower than that, and it's not benefiting my aerobic energy system. It's not helping me improve my cardiovascular endurance because it's too easy. If I go beyond 80%, it becomes anaerobic. There's still quite a few people who get this mixed up. So anaerobic is 80 to 90%. We are working at 60 to 80%, and specifically to begin with, because it's a weakness, I'm not going to start at 75% because it's a weakness. I'm not very good at it. So I'm going to start at the lower end of the training zone, which is 60%. So 60% of 200 is 120 beats per minute. For me being Mr. Davis, who's 20 years old. For you guys, you need to work it out. If you're 15 years old, your maximum heart rate is going to be 205. 220 minus your age. You then do 60% of that. So I'm thinking 123 beats per minute. And the training zone in general is 123 to whatever 80% of that maximum heart rate is, 164 beats per minute. But you are going to be working at the lower end of it. So looking to target 123 beats per minute. All of that information is crucial for you getting a good mark in this part of the work. You have to comment on how you calculate the intensity of your training. You're not just running but you're running at a specific pace and a specific level of intensity. Otherwise, it's just meaningless. You don't know whether it's actually benefiting you or not. Has to show real specific planning. It's based on you. So don't refer to someone else like in the third person. Say, you should run at 60% of your maximum heart rate. Say, I will. It's about me. I will be running at 60% of my maximum heart rate. To calculate this, I will do 220 minus my age. I am 15 years old. Therefore, my maximum heart rate is 205. To ensure that I'm training at 60% of that, I have to make sure that I'm training at 123 beats per minute, which is 60% of 205. That's how you work out the training intensity to ensure that you're working within the aerobic training zone. Okay, crucial information. You also give more information about the plan that you intend to follow for the training. Where will you do the training? Why will you do it there? What time will you do it and why? Will you train with anyone? What other safety precautions can you take? What sort of warm-up will you be doing? I think that comes on the next one. This is all I've gone off piece a bit, but this was where the intensity information was supposed to be. And then on the next bit, this is where you start to talk about the training and progressions. Just to be clear, this bit is all about the planning. So it's about where you're doing it, when you're doing it, who you're doing it with, what sort of equipment you might need, what's your thought process in terms of making sure safety is a crucial part of this, showing that you're doing things safely with good thought. So you're not going to be running on your own at night round, I don't know, Brixton. That's not great in terms of like safety thought processes on the road in Brixton in the middle of the night. You want to be running, you know, sort of maybe after school when it's still light. You want to be running in the local park so you're not on the road. You want to make sure that you've got a good pair of trainers on and you've done a good warm-up. All of those things, you know, every bit of this, you say, how can I make sure that this is safe and what are the benefits of doing it? Then you've got all that information about the training intensity. Don't bullet point it and cut it brief. It needs to be very, very clearly written out how you plan to do this. Then once you've mapped all of that out, the next bit is to really drill down on the training program, if you like. So you're not just doing that once. It's not a one-off thing. You're going to be doing it a number of times over a period of at least 6 to 8 weeks. And you need to say that. I have planned to cover this training for over a 8-week period to ensure that I'm making sufficient progress. Initially, because you're not very good at it, you might only run once or twice a week. After that, you might feel that that's now a time where you can show progression and overload and increase the frequency of your training. So you might then, for the next few weeks, you might then go up to 3 times a week. And then once you feel comfortable with that, you will push it up to maybe 4 times a week, but always giving yourself a day's rest in between, because that's good safety and you're not going to tire and fatigue and get injured. Okay, but that's how to structure it. You could do a table. You could map it out how often you're going to run each day of the week. So when are you going to do it? Are you going to run Monday and Wednesday? And then maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday? That's how you need to show that level of detail in the work, to show it's generally something, a plan that you can put together. That's what the best work does when it comes to this, this self-analysis and evaluation. So you have to show a thought process there. In addition to the frequency, so how often you're doing it, you could also increase the intensity. And now this is high level, but in terms of the intensity, you're always going to base it on the percentage of your maximum heart rate. And you've already said that you're looking initially at about 123 beats per minute. And your training zone is up to 80%, which is 164. So over time, you need to try and work it up towards that. But after a couple of weeks, you might decide to try and push it up to about from 60% to maybe 65% or 70%. So let's have a quick calculation. If you're 15, your maximum heart rate's 205, which is 220 minus your age. This time times 0.7, 143 beats per minute. So you've calculated the exact training zone that you training intensity that you want to hit from being 123 for a few weeks, which is 60%. Then you're going to try and up it to about 70%. And then when you feel comfortable, maybe go to 80%. You could even break it down more than that and look at 65%, 70%, 75%, 80%. And each time show the training intensity that you're looking at. That's the best quality work that you could do. This work on the intensity is so important for this piece of work, because this is the detail that the best PE students can put in there, and you'll get credit for it. I will give you credit on this work if you can detail this from 60%, 65%, 70%, 75%, 80%. So even the really good versions of the work that I've got haven't done that in detail. So that's something that you can do. The next thing is focusing on how you monitor it. So on the guidance sheet, it details various things that you can do. One of them, I think the first one, is to do with like a training diary. You could even give an example of what that training diary might look like. So have some sort of grid where you map out how often you're training, and how far you went, for instance, on your run. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on this run, week 1, week 2, week 3, and when I ran here, I ran for 20 minutes and I ran 3 kilometers. Then I had a rest. And on this one, I ran 3.2 kilometers. So you can detail it like that. Show an example of the train. You don't have to fill the whole thing in, but show an example of how you would use a training diary to map out the time that you ran for and the distance that you covered in that time. In theory, distances should go up slightly the longer you run, especially if you're running a little bit quicker in that time. But again, you have to map that out. Only the best work, and the best work is obviously going to get the most marks. The best work does that sort of thing. But showing a range of monitoring, that's even better. So you're not just doing a diary, but you're going to use a heart rate monitor whilst you're running to make sure that you're running at the correct intensity. Why is that important? Because if you're not training hard enough, then it's not going to benefit you. And if you're pushing yourself too hard, you're potentially going to get injured and you're not working to the plan. Heart rate monitor, you could have a Fitbit, you could have an app on your phone. For each of these, the best ones, whilst it doesn't have to be huge amounts of information, just outline how you expect that to help you. What service does that actually offer you in terms of monitoring? What's the information you're going to get? That's what the best work does. And everything focuses, or at least has a little bit of an interest in how that makes your training safe. Safe, not just in terms of making sure that you don't get mugged when you're running, but in terms of not getting injured, making sure that it's purposeful and productive, making sure that you maintain a good level of motivation all the way through. That's the sort of thing that you need to be including. And then the final thing to do with the training is to do with the SMART targets. And this is where you can do bullet points. It shouldn't be brief, but I will apply principles of training to ensure my training is effective. I will apply the principle of specificity, and then you say what that is and how you've applied it. Specificity is simply making sure the training targets the specific demands for what you're trying to work towards, i.e. improving cardiovascular endurance. So you are using continuous training. That's why it's specific. How is it measurable? Well, because you're doing all this sort of thing. How is it, I'm not going to fit all of this in. What's the A? Have a think. Achievable. So you're setting realistic targets. You're not saying, oh, in week 2, I will run 100 miles it's not realistic. Sorry, it's not achievable. So you need to make sure that that is something that you've applied. I've gone off piece there, haven't I? Right. Sorry, forget that. In terms of this, is just made a horrendous error. Who knows what the error is? Right. The error is your training principles are not smart, but they are sport. So deliberate error, honestly, forget all of that, what I said about specificity and measurability. You're not talking about targets, you're talking about principles of training. Sorry, got lost in my train of thought there. On this one, what's the S in terms of training principles? S is specificity. The P is progression. The O is overload, the R is reversibility, and the T is tedium. For each one of them, you need to make sure that you are applying that to your training. So how is the training specific? Well, that one is actually accurate. How have you applied, and you can do these together, progressive overload. Progressive is gradual changes. Overload is making it more difficult, essentially through frequency, intensity, and time. You need to detail each one of those. Reversibility is making sure that there's no significant gaps in the training. So that means that one, you're not going to have a whole week off, but equally, you're not going to train 3 times a day until you get injured, and then you have an extended period where you can't train. So it's about making sure that you've got the right level of training, reversibility, so you don't get injured and you don't give yourself too much time off. And then T for tedium, avoiding boredom. So what can you do? And I'm not talking about one day listening to Mariah Carey and the next day you're listening to Snoop Dogg. It's got to be something a little bit more P related. So it might be that you could change the activity, still do continuous training, but you could do cycling, you could do rowing, you could go on a cross trainer. So you're still working cardiovascular endurance, still working continuous training, but you just change the nature of the activity. That would be a good way of making sure you avoid boredom. The other version of doing that is actually change the training method. Ideally, you could still focus on cardiovascular endurance, but think about what other training methods other than continuous training could you use. Fartlek training. You could also do sort of distance interval training. You could do altitude training. You could do circuit training as an alternative. And if you're really pushing the boat out and wanted to throw in some options, you could completely mix it up by adding in an additional session where you worked on other fitness components such as weight training or plyometrics, just to give it some sort of variety. But obviously the primary benefit is going to be training methods that work on cardiovascular endurance. Right, then we get on to the final bit to do with the additional element of the specification that you need to comment on in the work. And we are all going to do arousal. The first bit is the general bit. So the general information, definition, what is it? Information about the inverted U, 3 stages of it. Remember, arousal here, performance here. As arousal goes up, performance also goes up to a point of the optimum level of arousal. And after that, as arousal continues to increase, performance comes down. So 3 key stages of arousal there. Every single skill, no matter what you've chosen, will have an optimal point of arousal, where it could be that it's too low and it could be that it's too high. Even if your skill is a fine skill that requires a relatively low level of optimum level of arousal, so it's focusing on accuracy and provision, you could still do it too low. It could still be not enough. So if you're throwing a dart and you're so casual that you don't really give it the level of focus and attention it deserves, you're not going to be accurate. Equally, if you start running up to the darts board, chucking the dart at the board, you're going to be over aroused. Every single skill has those 3 stages. So in general, you're outlining what the 3 stages are, and in general, you're saying that some skills you can be too high and some skills you can be too low. Comment on what the optimum means. Then you talk specifically about your highlighted skill weakness. If it's heading, if it's tackling, in most cases, you're probably going to say it's too high. You get too carried away, you lose your composure, your technique suffers as a result of that, and because of that, you perform the skill badly. Okay. In some cases, if you're focusing on, I think Abby, you said something about shooting in netball. That's more of precision skill, and you said that maybe you're too low, maybe you're not focused enough. In that case, you need to really concentrate, increase the level of arousal to get it up to that optimum level. In most cases, it's actually easier to say that you're going to bring it down. So if possible, wherever you can, even if it means changing it, it's easier to say that you are going to lower your level of arousal. And I'll tell you why. There are 3 stress management techniques that you can use. Can you remember what they are? One of them is positive self-talk. One of them is deep breathing. And one of them is mental rehearsal. Always spell rehearsal wrong. Only one of them is to do with increasing your level of arousal. So in that instance, you've only got one thing to talk about. Whereas if you're saying that you want to lower your level of arousal, you've then got 2 things that you can comment on. So 2 things means more work, means shows better knowledge, and therefore you're going to get more marks. In my opinion, it's better to say that you're going to try and lower your level of arousal. Okay, if it's absolutely impossible for you to do that, then just try and go to town on positive self-talk. And what you do is you say what it is. You say why it will help. You'll say when you can do it. And you can say in what part of the game could it be done. So not afterwards. Afterwards is too late. You have to say maybe during the build up to the game, during the breaks in play, during half time. Those are the times where you can say and give examples of exactly what it is you're going to do. The more detail you can put in here, the better, because these are the things that are going to get you the high level of mark for this work. So go through this meticulously against the guidance that I'll share again, because everything is in there to help you get the mark. If there's something you're not sure about, I'd rather you wrote it in on the work in red. I'm not sure about this, but I've tried to write it out. And that way I'm seeing that you've made an effort and you're not just ignoring the fact that I've told you to do continuous training and you've thrown in plyometric training instead. Okay, this is what's important to get you the big grades here. So good luck with it. Please send me the updated version as soon as you've done it. And let's try and really, really drill down on the detail here and on the specifics from the guidance. Don't just skirt through it, assuming you know what you're doing. Check your work. Get rid of all the silly spelling errors. Get rid of the font 16 on the work. Get rid of the 20 lines in one paragraph. Read it through, proofread it, get someone else to read it to check it makes sense. Those are all things that ultimately will contribute towards you getting a good mark. Right, hope that's proved useful, guys, and looking forward to seeing the next version of this at the end of next week. All the best.